everyone. I'm so delighted to be here, and I'm going to be a little speedy because we're going to try to catch up a few minutes here on for our presentation. So I'll just wait till the slides are up and running, which they should be shortly. Now we've swapped. You got mine, I'm getting yours. Excellent. Okay. So my topic is to take a look at the hybrid mind, but from a legal perspective, from the humanities, social scientific side of things. So we've had this wonderful presentations of engineering marvels mixed with biology, with medicine at the highest and most cutting edge level. So what are we going to make of all this from the legal perspective? So I just need to advance. Do I ask you to advance or? Whoop, okay, so let's me start just with a couple of words about what we mean by this idea of the hybrid mind. So as we approach this, we were interested, as my colleagues have mentioned, in this combination of four things that we're moving toward, if not perfectly realized necessarily already, but looking at the combination of the mind, the brain, software and hardware together, and what that might produce as a form of hybrid combination. I want to understand this blending of organic and artificial intelligence and to start thinking about it, even if we're not fully there yet. And we have a whole host of questions to answer about that. So as we talk about the hybrid mind, we're looking at the fusion of these two things, and in particular, the integration of mutual adaptation between both organic and artificial intelligence. Thanks. So I'll be quick here because you've heard this. We have elements of the hybrid mind already reflected in various kinds of technologies. So we talked about brain stimulation technologies that are able to alter behavior. If we think about DBS for Parkinson's disease, to alter motion in the application of DBS and other devices to address psychiatric symptoms, alteration of perception, whether it's of cochlear implants, retinal implants. I know that's not brain, that's a bit more peripheral, but the concept is there of inducing perceptual experience. And the move now is to start trying to do that cortically, directly. We have interpretation of brain activity, inferring intended movement and speech for people who are paralyzed, back reconstructing what the perceptual experiences of people are from their brain data, the decoding of brain data to infer different kinds of mental content. And then, of course, both at once, the closed loop systems that will both and this is actually in current use, an implanted closed loop deep brain stimulation device from NeuroPace to monitor the brain for the development of a seizure and then to stimulate to prevent it. So we have that monitoring and stimulation ongoing already in a device. Of course, we talked about haptic feedback, and the move toward trying to bring DBS for psychiatric purposes by monitoring the onset of psychiatric symptoms is another example. But if we're to get to the full hybrid mind, by the way, that's already remarkable enough to do that middle adaptive component. And it does include a lot of use of AI techniques to figure out what the decoder is between brain data and mental content, for example. But with the full hybrid mind, we have in mind this bidirectional exchange of ongoing mutual adaptation between user and intelligent device. And the potential applications one can imagine are large and both awe-inspiring and a little bit frightening. So thinking about a device for shared control of some sort of tool, which is guessing at the intentions of the users and subtly shaping toward it, monitoring mental states as a form of correction and course correcting, monitoring the ambient environment to make guesses at what exactly should be affected in that environment. And similarly, thinking about this kind of ongoing intelligent adaptation of mental states according to the needs of the moment. And I saw discussions of how even for Parkinson's, you could have a smart device trade off between sort of the therapeutic objective and minimization of side effects like harm to the vocal ability, even though the motor symptoms are alleviated, as a function of what is the social environment of the person. What are they trying to do? So that in real time, you have this intelligent modulation of what the objective of the stimulation is. And one could think of all kinds of other applications, the adaptation of perceptual input to the brain as a function of, is the person now stressed and apparently overwhelmed? Are they attending to some aspect of the auditory or visual scene that needs to be made sharper because that's their focus of interest? So what I'm getting at here is the potential for this deeper, more intelligent shaping of that interaction, which is doubtless going to affect the user as well as the device in mutual adaptation. So if we think about this in particular, which we don't have yet, but where the esquisse, as they say in French, the sketching is in line to be able to do these kinds of things eventually, what does it mean? How do we feel about it? And so let me take a quick step back to the next slide and say, wait a minute, is there anything really new here? Are we getting, or am I getting all freaked out for nothing? Humans have always reused tools. We've always embodied tools. We've always relied upon tools, including a range of prostheses, which sort of amplify our abilities or replace lost abilities. And we've always had mental tools and prostheses. You look at the extended mind thesis of Clark and Chalmers, which is the idea that mental functions have always been performed across a mixture of organic content in the skull, as well as external objects and people with whom our cognitive processes are realized. We remember things by writing them down. We remember things by talking to people. We don't do memory just in our brains. So if we've always had these, and I have a little quote from Clark here from 2002 in more eloquent language than I use, he says, "For we are and long have been biotechnological symbionts, reasoning and thinking systems spread across biological matter, and the delicately co-determined gossamers of our socio-technological nest." So that's what I was trying to say in a more soutenu language. So that if it's always been that way, is there anything to see here? Well, the extended mind involved a person interacting with other human beings and objects, notebooks, computers. The hybrid mind involves a kind of direct interaction with the device, with the indirect products of other minds by way of software. It's directly into the brain. It's a little bit different from what Chalmers and Clark were talking about in terms of the hybrid mind and the use of objects and people in the environment. There's also the possibility for reduced awareness and independence, the standpoint from which one can evaluate the degree to which we're relying upon and incorporating the external into our own processes. We know when we're using a computer, a tool, we're asking someone for advice. With the hybrid mind, we may not always know about the contribution of that device. So maybe there's something new. And so let me step back, and I admit too, freedom or enslavement is a little bit hyperbolic as language, but stay with me for a moment here. Technologies have long been two-faced, Janus-faced, they say. They give power and they induce dependence. They give us a range of new abilities, but give us moral quandaries in the sense of what to do about our new abilities, but also they subtly shift our moral values. So as I wanted to bring the story of Thamus and Thoth, King Thamus and the god Thoth, to you at this point, because this is also the extended mind thesis going on in 370 BC. Plato, talking to Phaedrus, recounts the story of the king of Egypt, talking to the god of writing. Writing is a technology and incidentally a hybrid. Let me open a parenthesis here. As I was looking up on Wikipedia for this picture, I looked around and discovered that these hybrids, these animal-human, animal-animal hybrids, if you look it up on Wikipedia, you have multiple screens of these things. It is a conserved observation across all cultures and into prehistory where one finds these mammoth bone statues with a lion-headed person. This hybridization, there is a clue to the fact there's something going on here when we look at this long history of fascination with hybridization across these lines of the animal-human, for example. There's something going on here, and often these devices or these hybrids have some sort of supernatural quality. The hybrid is above us mere organic individuals or below. It's both a threat and a fascination. So anyway, back to Thamus and Thoth. Thoth, who himself is a hybrid, and God of writing says, guess what? Writing will give us better memories. Extended mind thesis. Demas says, actually, you know what? Writing will give you the appearance of memory. Humans will seem omniscient but know nothing. Writing will cause people to lose the faculty of memory. So my basic point here, in addition to being able to go on an excursion in cultural anthropology around hybrids, is this two-faced sense with which we might want to think about the role of becoming dependent upon these technologies as we develop them to solve various problems. So freedom or enslavement is at the heart here, I think, of our reactions to this. In the next slide, I have one more cultural anthropology slide to take you through. And I find this a rather interesting paper, which I recommend to you, by Smits from 2009, Taming Monsters. He advances, I'm sorry, I actually don't know if it may be she. Does somebody know if this is a... Anyway, Smits advances this theory called the monster theory and says, you know, human beings, it's a feature of human thought that we organize into classifications, we categorize. It's a great way of understanding the world, to reduce complexity, make predictions around the world by classifying likes alike. If we weren't able to do that, we would be in a welter of disorganized stimuli. We think in categories. They're very important to us. And Smith says, if you go and look at cultural anthropology, you'll find that there's some categories, dichotomous pairs of categories that are highly conserved across all many, let's put it that way, societies, despite their substantial cultural differences. So all societies make these firm distinctions between man and woman, between nature and artificial or cultural, between human and animal, between organism and machine, between life and death. These are important distinctions and boundaries. And when we start to see the crossing or the transgressing or demonstrations that those boundaries are not as firm as we might have thought, it's destabilizing, it's frightening, it's sometimes exhilarating, it sometimes leads us to see the supernatural and the divine. There's something about the destabilization of these categories that's troubling. And this combination of the artificial and the biological, or the artificial and human, is what we're talking about here with this hybrid mind, and is to some extent underlying some of the disquiet about this. But aren't we organic? Aren't we biological? And what happens if we invite into what is the core of the human being, our sense of self, our conscious experience, this technological artifact? Have we transgressed a boundary that makes us uncomfortable? So this fascination and fear is explained by the same thing, and it's the impossibility of interpreting these ambiguous phenomena that have qualities of different sides of these mutually exclusive categories. And so I finally get to the law. So Smith says there's 4 responses that human beings, societies can take to these monsters. We are told that Frankenstein tells us technology out of control. We have ancient warnings from Prometheus and others about playing God. The unnatural beings are monsters, but what can we do about them? And he says, or she says, not sure, 4 possible responses. We exercise them, we repel, we prohibit, we prevent their existence to defend the category, distinction, which is absolute. We adapt, which is we change the monsters in some way that makes them fit into our categories. We embrace, and this is the flipping from the monster to the miracle or the sublime. We celebrate the new. And the 4th is we assimilate the monsters. And to do that, what we do is we adapt those cultural categories by which we're judging them to be able to resolve that discomfort. And one example, not from the brain, is the invention or discovery of a concept of brain death when we had the positive pressure ventilator and we had apparently comatose bodies with their heart beating. Nobody knew what that was. And there was several years of angst about what to do about that. Can you turn it off? Is that killing someone? And finally we said, no, we have something called brain death. We are going to modify that living death categorical distinction in a way that allows us to be comfortable with this. We've assimilated that monster. So a little slide now about the law. The law operates by categories too, just like everything. We try to simplify the complexity and messiness of human interactions with a number of categories. This allows us to understand, to produce answers expeditiously. It allows people to predict what might happen. And in general, it's supposed to reflect deeper underlying values, but it's a system of simplification and rules. And we have these legal categories. We have body and mind. And I speak from a common law perspective as opposed to civilian legal perspective. But in the common law, we had a lot of trouble figuring out what to do with minds for a while. We have now determined that, yes, we can protect them and recognize them, but not in, I think, as elegant or as organized a way as the civilian system. Common law is very bottom up. Civilian is more kind of more starts with the principles a little bit more than we do. But anyway, there's body and mind. There's also person and object. And there's very different rules that apply to all these categories. So where does the hybrid mind fit? It has elements of all of these things. You've got your body, brain, mind, mental functions. You've got objects of two types: tangible objects, the hardware, intangible objects, the software. And we have a social legal system set up for all of those things that's just different. And if we're going to say there's a hybrid form that combines them all, how do we figure out the rules that are going to apply? And this is something that we've been engaged in our project, Hybrid Mind. And I'll give you just two quick examples for reasons of time. The next slide will ask the question, can you own a hybrid mind? Well, you can't own a mind. We've never asked that question before because you can't do that. Similar problems with privacy of thought. We haven't had the ability to really get directly at your thoughts, so we didn't worry about it too much. But if we talk about ownership of the mind, we have a software component and hardware component susceptible to being owned. If we start with the sort of simple-minded existing legal categories. And so we might ask the question, what happens if we decide to discontinue the license to your piece of implanted neurotechnology? Or we don't support the legacy versions, we force an upgrade. Or we have license terms, as is common. This is in all the end user license agreements that none of you read, and I don't read either. We all click OK. But there's all kinds of stuff in there that you're not supposed to do with the software. And there is actually one of the first lawsuits dealing with neurotechnology coming out of Chile now, or last year or so. We have people here who've written about it and can tell you all the details. But this was over a non-invasive EEG device that monitors the brain to give wellness, feedback, information from concentration, but you couldn't get access to the brain data unless you paid the pro license. Okay, so can you own your own mind? Well, you can license parts of your own mind, apparently. So these are questions to address with the software component. What about the hardware component? Can we repossess something that's integrated into the body? Probably not. I think we can handle that with the law easily enough by addressing bodily integrity if it's implanted. But even then, we're having problems, all kinds of problems. And this is a discussion that, again, we have experts here who've written on, of the problem of the return of devices at the conclusion of trials of implanted devices. There's an active discussion right now about what is owed to participants in those trials. And I also put a little link to this article about what happens to implanted patients who have retinal implants or various stimulation devices for treatment of pain, where the companies either go bankrupt, discontinue the product line. There's not a repossession, but it is also a question of ownership of the hybrid mind in some critical sense, lying with that manufacturer of the device itself. So what should we do about that? And so I've been interviewing people who participated in the implanted BCI trials in the United States. And one of them, I asked him, what was it like at the conclusion of the trial? You no longer have this device. And he said, well, it was like another injury, having to reconcile with the loss of now not being able to move my hand again. Even though I could only ever use it in the lab, it was a loss again. So who owns the hybrid mind? I'm not sure we have totally worked out what this can or should mean as people start to become more functionally, emotionally, phenomenologically integrated with their devices. And then my last example, from a legal perspective, is, can a hybrid mind be responsible for anything? This is, of course, a key preoccupation of legal systems. Who's responsible? Well, if we boil it down to this sort of simple level, the law is not sort of as concerned about, well, anyway, what is the law is concerned about is whether an action is voluntary. Do you have conscious control over it? And are you mentally rational? Are you understanding the action and its wrongfulness? It's less worried about free will, like where did those sort of, are we just mechanisms that do things? Law's not so concerned about that. It's no, did you have some ability to be in control of yourself? And did you have rational perception about what the heck was going on and what you were doing? And so if we look to the hybrid mind now, we might have devices that play a role in interpreting intentions, if we're thinking of a readout brain-computer interface, but also subtly shaping user intentions. And so I bring another quote from my interviews, the one at the top, who talks about, it's hard to actually, through thought, to get the arm to go straight from A to B. Sometimes it does what it wants, and so it has kind of a momentum or inertia, and if it overshoots, I just go around in an arc and come back. So what we have an example there is the shaping of intention as a function of the experience of using the device and the way it responds to the person. So is he responsible for this strange arc on the way from A to B? His intention has shifted as a function of that interaction. And then the other thing, and also on control, is people talked a lot about if you try hard to think with your mind to move something, it doesn't go so well. And at some point in the learning or the mutual adaptation between the person and the decoder, they realize it's way better if I just do it. Sort of the way I move my arm here. I'm not thinking a lot about all the muscles, and I just do it. And it's because it's become unconscious. The motor sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Choreography is unconscious. Same thing here. It's recapitulation of our own natural ways of moving into becoming unconscious as well. And of course, it has to be that way. It's just not efficient to move in this effortful top-down kind of manner. And so, again, that's a decoder involved there, and the person's not thinking about it anymore. Is that enough control? And I would say to you that if I'm in control of the movements I do this way, then someone with the BCI is equally in control of the movements they do with this other tool. So perhaps there's no problem for the law there. There has to also be rationality. And if we start thinking about neurotechnologies that induce perceptions and alter emotions, it is possible that a device could cause someone to perceive something that's completely incorrect, a hallucination, as it were. Normally in the law, we would then say that person is not rational if they're laboring under a delusion or a hallucination. So similarly, a neurotechnology could inject information that's incorrect, and we would probably in law recognize that as impairing the rationality of the decision. So I think, and then I'm still thinking this through, but I think that legal solutions exist for these kinds of questions. A person is rational, or I should say responsible, if they are free and rational enough, which is the way we apply our normal unaided, the way we think about our normal unaided actions. We can be responsible despite the contributions of unconscious processes, because that's always happening. But if there's a very, sort of a very severe disjuncture in control or rational perception, we also have a negligence backup option, which is if we are using tools that are not fit for purpose, that are not properly under our control or mastered, we can be held liable in negligence for the future incapable action we perform. And so I think that will apply here as well. So I'm going to stop there, I think, because we need to move on. And thank you very much.